So on this edition, we're going to be inspecting a 1948 GMC PD4151 parlor bus. It's an ex-Greyhound bus. This bus came out of service directly into private hands, and so we were inspecting it for a potential buyer. And so as we walk around, we'll point out what we observed. And here we're looking at the top of the bus where the clearance lights are, the Michigan lights in the center there. And they're all in good shape. There's no cracks, all the components are there. Even the roof doesn't seem to have any dents up here, which many of them have little small dents or bigger dents like ours, from getting the trees whacked into them. You'll notice all the rivets are where they belong. You can see the original paint lines from the original paint scheme. Coming over here to the passenger side where the door is, you can see the great color in that glass lens. Coming down to the mirror here, the base is cracked. A lot of these end up that way. These are just aluminum castings. The door is in fantastic shape. Really no major rash at all. The base of the door there, typically that metal that you see there is really banged up and scratched, or even dented if the wind catches the door and bends it around that bumper, but this one here looks in really good shape. You're looking at the bumper itself now, and just look at the curve of it. It's pretty straight. It has a little slight variation on the bright side, but it's all nice there. When you look at the belt lines there, they're in pretty good shape as well. The turn signal here, the metal housing is rusted away, but you can get those off of eBay here, where I'm pointing out the lens is there, which is great, the original lens. A lot of these buses were converted through the years because those just didn't show up as well as a large lens that didn't have that little arrow showing. So they modernized them a lot of times. The rust that you see on that front breastplate, that's actually chrome, nickel plated, back in the original era. But through the years they get chromed, and that plating has failed. So that needs to be redone. But it's fairly straight. And as we walk over here, we're gonna see that little dent right there, center screen coming up here. The driver has that little door there that they can open, and that allows you to get some ventilation down by your feet here. And this one's kind of rusted and crusty, but it can get cleaned up. And this lower belt, there's a door that behind there. When this bumper is dropped down, there's a spare tire compartment there, and this needs to be straightened out a little bit. To the left there, you can see the bolt that you would undo to open that up. The one on the driver's side here is missing. Then there's another bracket that goes here where this flat plate area is for your license plate that's missing, but we got an extra if the new owner would like one. And he's got a chain wrapped around so it's easier to pull that around. He's just got it wrapped up there so it's not sitting on the ground. Driver's side bracket looks pretty good. Mirror overall actually looked pretty good actually. There's a couple little screws up there coming around that roof line there. Not sure what's going on there, but the bus is nice and straight. We went through all the bay doors except the very last one near the battery box. We couldn't get it open. This toolbox on this door that's right here, it's considered a driver's toolbox. You can get that open. And then even looking at this lower plate as well on its driver's side, it's got a little scuff, but not banged up. Very nice shape. All the rims have been changed out except for the left rear. It still has original rims, which on that side for one reason or another. This bus has the original pony motor for the air conditioning system, so it's still intact. There's a few other surprises with this bus that we discovered. They basically just removed the interior seating and overhead bins. Everything else is original on this bus. And they installed a little bit of interior, but we'll get to that in a little bit. The bay doors are really nice. They're not rusted out and corroded. Looking down here, you have the smudge pots. There's two of them there. There should be three. You can get those off eBay, which is a really cool feature. I don't know if they all came with that, but this one definitely did. And that kind of creamish color seems to be a stock color. We took a sample and we actually matched it to our bus, and sure enough, they're the same. And there's your pony motor. You can kind of see through there. It's the radiator for the AC system. And we're kind of walking up on here, showing the different parts of the bay door here. You can see the original pull chains are there and operational. One of the doors on the other side is kind of rusted. We tried to break it loose, but it didn't want to give. But it's all there. And for the age of the bus, it's surprisingly in good shape for being an over-the-road unit. Here we're showing that the paint's kind of flaky, but these tend to break right in there. It's all cast aluminum. Looking at your rub rails, your doors in general, all the bottoms are usually banged up, scratched through years of service, and these are in really good shape. The drivers of this bus took care of it. Now, the gentleman that currently owns this bus is very, very, very knowledgeable. Been around these buses for a lot longer than most all of us. But oh, by the way, look at that G. You can still see where the stickers were for Greyhound. So I'll continue to kind of walk down here and kind of point out the letters. But this guy said they didn't get. There was two ways that these buses came out of service. Either they hit 3 million miles or 20 years old, and that's the only way they came out of service. So we've heard of buses coming out of service like ours coming out of service around 1964. We've heard buses coming out as late as 67. But then again, we've heard of buses that came out a lot later than that. So we don't know. But here's a cool feature that we're going to get to coming up here is the battery box. And I want you to really focus on this. Here's even more lettering. You can see it's really awesome. Keep in mind it was raining, so that's probably why this is showing up a lot easier. This battery box has the original rubber cover for the locking mechanism that I'm pointing out here. That is a shock that is still there. This door is in really fantastic shape. A lot of buses I've seen are just a mess. The battery rack here, it has its issues, but it's in still great shape. Still needs to get cleaned up and get some new contacts and everything. And we're moving over here to our emergency exit door, and this bus has had a little bit of sag in the back, but this door can be adjusted a little bit. But it has been modified by Greyhound to deal with this sag, and you'll notice if you look at enough buses, they all kind of got repaired a little differently than others depending upon where they came from. Now this is a Pacific Greyhound bus, so this was done out in California, but you can see the gap is a little bit off on this, so it does need to get addressed. And when you start looking down here at the radiator, if you've been around these buses enough, this will be something that you're not used to seeing. It has cool feature that originally came on the buses that a lot of them are missing. Our buses are missing them. These flappers will control the temperature on your radiator. So if it's cold outside, these will close and allow the motor to keep more heat in there, so it's able to control the operational temperature of the motor. And these are quite rusty and crusty, but they can get cleaned up. Back bumper's pretty straight. All the original turn signals, these housings are in fantastic shape. This one can easily be tapped out and be pretty well perfect. These little dents in these two ribs are easily replaced. We have access to replacement ribs. And you'll see this little patch on the left here, center screen. This is on both sides. Those are not really patches, that's part of the reinforcement that Greyhound did on this particular bus to deal with the sag in the rear of the bus. And when we go into the engine compartment here, you'll see how they swapped out certain components with steel to complete that reinforcement. You'll see a little bit of the pans. The original pans are on this bus, at least some of them. And we got Mr. Cow over here saying hi. He's actually quite friendly. This particular housing has a little more damage. Somebody's allowed the door to swing around quite a bit more, but again, you can tap that out pretty easily. And this door's in pretty good shape. And there's your other, so to speak, patch, but these are definitely professionally done. You can see how nicely they're stamped. This is one of the flaws in the roof line. This clearance light sometime in its past was pushed in, whether it's a tree or something of that nature. So that'll need to be popped out to address that issue. Your Michigan lights here are in really good shape as well. Now we had this little side door open, which gets to your electronics, so it's not fully closed, but you'll see how straight the side of the bus is here. Transmission door is in pretty good shape as well. So if you're looking for a straight bus, this is pretty good. But if we were looking for another bus, this would definitely be a contender. Probably hasn't ran for a good 20 years, however. But all these little doors, they're in really good shape. So we had all these bay doors open. There's been a lot of various parts stored in them, so we're pulling stuff out. And so we're the last ones to get into this property to salvage parts off of parts buses. And that'll be featured in a whole different video than this bus particularly. But look at those doors, they're just so straight. Now this is a little bit of damage in the side here, but that's easily replaced. The parts are available that we've acquired. But that's not bad for some kind of road rash that it received, probably a tree branch. But all the windows are there, they're all complete. Now, also on this side of the bus is some roof repair that's coming up here. And it was all riveted together. Now we would prefer that this spot right here, you see here, we'd prefer that gets cut out and a new piece of metal put in there and welded in, but they apparently chose to just re-rivet it in there. But being that you're going to be repainting this bus, I would go ahead and take it out and weld in a new piece. It'll be a lot smoother because that's pretty bumpy. But they must have hit a tree branch. There's not much options that can cause that issue. We're looking at where the Greyhound dog would be placed on the bus, and you can kind of make out where its tail is, starting right there, center screen. And being that they were placed up so close to the bus, they kind of developed their own little shadow that kind of... So we're gonna go ahead and step inside the bus here in a minute. First, Jill's gonna step in here for a second and clear out a pathway in, but this bus is being used a little bit for storage while we were visiting this property, picking parts, and this is a really nice spot to stage everything before loading up our truck and heading home. So we spent about a week here, and some items you just don't want to get wet, and we were there literally the whole time in torrential downpour. So looking at this door, you have a bit of war scars here, but all of this is simple metal that you can replace. If you're curious about the body tag on this coach, it is the 16th bus built in the 4151 series for 1948. So there's just under 400 of these buses built. It has the original finger pincher still in place there, which is kind of cool. A lot of those are missing. You have the step wheel light there on the bottom door. This door here, that's the next one up, it is missing. But anything that is needed for this bus, for the most part, I believe is available on the property on the parts buses. So we're making sure that we're keeping these parts available for it. If you follow our previous videos, you will find that this little plate that's been created next to the driver is to cover up where the wiring harness has been rerouted. And in our previous videos, you'll see underneath that top step is where the original location is for these harnesses, and water would get down there and just sit, and it would rot out and short the wiring harness out. So this is a fix that they did. This is a California bus, so it came straight out of service, so this is a repair they would have done back at that time. So all these panels you see, these are the bottom sides of the overhead bins, by the way. So we're going to take a look at the privacy screen. So there's a trim piece right here that's being pointed out that is missing. However, there's plenty of parts buses here that have that part available. Real simple. At some point, somebody added this little pamphlet holder. So maybe they're wanting to advertise other routes that a customer may have interest in. Don't see that often, and you see those next to the drivers, so there's variations of. Now going up here, we're going to start looking at the overhead ventilation. The underside cover here is missing, but the one on the driver's side's there, so you can make a copy. You got all the original sealing there. They did have carpet. They started to convert this bus and didn't really seem to finish it, I guess. It's just basically a hangout type environment, seems like. There's a little bit of a overhead bin there for you. Not much of it, but a little bit. You do have a lot of the original components up in the driver's area there. It's missing the driver's light, but the switches are there and everything. So there'll be a little bit of an odds and ends that might need to be located, but it's not the end of the world. It's got your original sun visors, which is pretty cool too. Got your original seat, the bar that goes behind the drivers there, and I believe the tube that holds the privacy screen that can go up, a customer could have chosen to bring up behind the driver's seat. I think that's down below in one of the bay areas, or there's a parts bus that has it. So now we're going to take a look over here. The driver's window, it's all complete. The mechanism's there, but we think the pin that allows the window to crank up and down, see we're here highlighting where somebody has cut this panel out to service that window. So a panel needs to be made to correct that. But they just didn't make that easy to service. But the pin that holds the crank in place has clearly sheared off, but everything is there for that window to work correctly. That pin does indeed become a sacrificial component if for some reason things jammed up. So we're going to look at the dash. It is complete. We did notice that all the gauges are there. The cover plate is missing, but those were plastic. We're looking at having ours reproduced. This one here has its plastic. The whole top row of knobs do work, then the half on the left side do work on this. The right ones I didn't try too much. They seem to be a little bit stuck. Again, the bus has been sitting for about 20 years, but you have the original dash. It's all complete. You have a little small driver's door there too that you can see it's peeking out. So you have all the original walls and the armrests that are original to the bus. Most all of them were there, in fact, and you have the little stainless trim that went at the base of these walls, which is really cool. These seats were just in here for storage, and they're not available. We own those. We put these in there for storage. Or actually, he had them in there for storage. Actually, that's where he kind of kept them. But yeah, they tore one side of the wall down, so the armrests and stuff are missing from that side. But it would have been nice to get some of those armrests, but he wouldn't sell any of them. But we have some from our bus, so I think we have enough to do our 3 rows. All the window shades seem to be here, but you can see the side that got the sun, they're toast. So it looks like, you know, it might not be a bad idea to reproduce components like this sometime down the line. You got the carpet from the ceiling all piled up there, of course. So when you look at the ceiling, you can kind of see the glue from when they glued the carpeting up into the ceiling, but it's kind of cool. It's still there. I mean, you can see where the ribs used to be and all that, but they're gone. There's just a little bit left in this back closet off to the left here coming up, but it's too bad. I actually like those details. But yeah, they had this carpet all over the ceiling. People like it for acoustics, but I don't know. I think carpet belongs on the floor. So even though it was kind of a basic build out, they did not do any outside holes onto the bus, which is really cool. I don't recall any rooftop holes or anything, so really you can rip out what you see here and just totally make it your own. The shades on this side are in much better shape. So they're still bowed or whatever, but at least they're in good shape overall. But you still can't really use a lot of it. You really need to reproduce a lot of these. And I think it's worth it. I think there's probably enough of us out there, including us, that need some of these. And I think if somebody had a mold made, I'd be game for some of them. Now this is really cool. You still have the original back seat. This guy has several buses, and this is the only one with the original back seat. You still even have the emergency exit door information on the door, which is cool. And again, you still have the original walls in this case. And a lot of these buses, through the years, they've been upgraded and the walls have been changed. So how much truth is that these are indeed 100% original material? I personally don't know that myself. But I can tell you that the seats in general, they are the original material. They compare to seats that we had in our coach where we had the seat bottoms. You have all the original bulkhead here. That's what we're highlighting. All the lights are there, but they kind of built it out a little bit, but the bulkhead is there. So the bones are here. You have some of the overhead structure to the overhead bins that was used to help strengthen the wall. And there's some pieces there that have this original stainless, which unfortunately is the only pieces left. And it's one of the coolest details in the buses, and it seems like a lot of these buses, people just took them out. We're looking to replace our ceiling because the owner of our bus had put another covering over the top and kind of ruined the panels. So we're going to look to reproduce our panels, but we have, I believe, most of our stainless, so we want to reinstall as much of it as possible with our layout design. And it's out of focus, but that's another one of those brackets. One of the other things to point out here is below the seat here, it still has the original flooring and covers in place, which is kind of cool. We had some of that in our bus, but this is nice and complete. I really, really like this bus. Obviously, if you're putting a bed back here, you're not going to reuse that seat, but it's still kind of cool. I mean, I would save it for a person down the line that is looking to have a fully seated bus, and we do plan to get one down the line. So that's a seat I would love to at least put on a shelf at our shop for later usage. Now, we had bought all these seats here. There's only enough here for 3 rows of seats, both right and left. Then there was one that that he had stashed down in one of the bays. So that gives us what we were looking for our bus. It's too bad he didn't have more. Here we're pointing out the fact that even though there was a stove here, they never put a ventilation for it. So a lot of times people would, and they'd poke a hole through the roof. Now, one thing, you kind of look at that floor there, the floor's been clearly replaced. It's in several strips. So in the engine compartment here, you can kind of see these plates against the wall there. Those are steel. That's part of the reinforcement that they had done. The generator, you can kind of see it. If you know what you're looking at as far as these motors, you'll see that's not the large generator that would have been. That's pretty stock in here. And so we're just taking a little peek. You can see a spin-on oil filter, or actually fuel filter, should I say. But everything looks pretty good, pretty clean. Can't complain too much there. I mean, other than the fact it looks like it hasn't ran for 20 years. And that's been kind of confirmed. It was a running driving bus, but the guy who had it prior to the current ownership, I guess, didn't really have the proper mechanical knowledge to keep it running. So you're going to go through this bus clearly, as you can see with the wiring harness and various components. So over here you got a pretty clean engine, all said and done, original oil baths. You don't see the external fuel rail, so it's going to have the motor that you're looking for if you're looking for a high block. This is most likely a high block because they took the external fuel rail out, so it's a good candidate for 4-valve with the Jake brakes if you chose to upgrade to that. But you can see where the engine mount is. That again over on the side is steel as well, so versus the aluminum, so it doesn't have as much flex. So it's a much stiffer system in the back here. You can see the Fran shroud in there. We try to take a peek in there. You'll see in a second here, I believe, in this video where we're trying to take a peek to see, can we see the radiator any? But you really can't. You have the original old school style oil filter there. So that needs to be upgraded. But yeah, some of these components that you see here are a little different than original, and you got to keep in mind that these motors were changed out probably more than 2 or 3 times in its lifetime in service. Again, you can kind of see the bottom pan is sticking out underneath the bumper, which I think is pretty cool that is even still there as well. Kind of like the surprise with the radiator. You have original turn signals there. A little dent in that housing that can get popped out. So we're just walking down the side of the bus here, which we've already gone over with, so no sense of rehashing any further on this bus. But again, with this bus, it did have its re-strengthening done, a little different than some of the other buses. Here we're looking at the target sign. Somebody took a little bit of a grinder, it appears, to that target sign. It's supposed to be a little more fluted, but it's there, and I think that can be actually cleaned up a little bit with a little bit of a grinder and give the effect back pretty simply. No sense of having to replace those. It just needs to be properly sanded. I think somebody did a poor attempt at trying to clean them up. But it's all there. Those lenses are originally glass. That one has a crack like all of them. And of course, I think I mentioned before, these 2 ribs here are easily replaced. And there's the rest of that patch. So now you kind of see the idea. The whole entire structure was really upgraded from the original aluminum. I've seen a couple variations now, 3 different variations so far. The gentleman owns all these buses. There's a couple other buses here that he's removed the engines out of. One is the convertible bus that somebody totally hacked to shreds before he acquired it, and the bus next to it, which he was going to do a modification on for an engine and tranny, but of course, as usual, you find a better bus and a better bus and a better bus, and so that's how he acquired his collection. He's been collecting these since way back when these buses were a dime a dozen. So they're sitting on this property and for the most part being preserved from a junkyard. Some of these buses were acquired also because towns got on the individual's cases for having these on their property and said, you got to get rid of them. So we acquired them. So there's various reasons why people acquire buses, but buying a bus, you got to keep in mind, you got to have a place that allows them to be parked and have the means to do the repairs. These are not cheap to necessarily get into, but if you have one that's running and driving, they're not all that bad. I mean, yeah, it's $3,200 in tires, so it's not as cheap as having a regular vintage car, but then again, it has a cool factor. It's like having a dozen classic cars. But if you're using it as an RV, you compare this to a diesel pusher, the cool factor on this is way better. Maintenance cost is about the same. So I will go for one of these all day long. There's the peek into the pony motor air conditioning. I think that was a little better shot than before. So we're just kind of rehashing a little bit. So this bus here is available for $8,000, but it has a potential buyer. So if you do have interest in this bus, you can email us. All of our information will be available at the end of this video. There is a small finder's fee related to this. Since we did drive out to it and inspect it, we'd like to recoup some of our costs. Yes, we were there for parts, but you know, we're trying to build a bus for our museum. So we did spend the time here and went through it pretty well. We can answer any questions pretty well related to this bus. We spent between 2 to 4 hours going through this bus and got to know it quite well. Again, if we were in the market for a bus, we would buy this bus, but you got to know that you are going through this bus completely. It has all the good bones that somebody's looking for, especially one that has very, very little road rash, as we call it. All the hard to find parts you've got here, what minor things it needs, are fairly easy to get. Finding a bus with the privacy screen and the front ventilation ducts, well, in my book, that's a good win-win. But you'll have some folks that don't care for that. They want to put a chair over there and be closer to the driver and put their feet up on the dash. That's fine. This bus is not for you. But because you really don't want to rip that out and ruin this bus. This is really a bus that is only going to be sold purposely to a person who's going to appreciate it for what it is and restore it for what it is. The owner is pretty darn adamant about that. As far as he's concerned, it can stay there. So unless you're that person, he really doesn't want it to go anywhere. So there you have it. Full inspection, pretty cool opportunity, rare opportunity, but we'll have a waiting list that we will create on this bus, and we'll weed out potential buyers, because we are going to keep the individual's information private. They would like to keep their privacy, as we all do. But in this case, a little more important. So check out the video again. If you're really serious in the market, this will need to be towed out, or you can have the individual do the repairs needed. They have all the needed equipment to do that, full machine shop as well, and they can definitely, if you want the motor rebuilt or whatever you want, motors that sit for this length of time may need some seals and such replaced. He can do that. So it's actually in a really good predicament. So there you have it. So do subscribe, do like us, and we'll see you on another round of what's going on in the shop. We'll see you guys again soon. Thanks for joining us.